Africa. Welcome to another awesome episode of Building a Better South Africa Together, brought to you by Anglo American and Why. My name is Nia Brown and I am your host. Let's talk about AI. Lots of people very excited about artificial intelligence and the ways in which it can contribute to various industries around the world. But studies are showing that 63% of young South Africans are using banking apps every single day. We use them to make transfers, use them to make payments. But 40% of young South Africans are still very, very concerned about cyber crime. So joining me on the show today to help us dive into this conversation a little bit more, we've got Dr. Daniel Ramotsoela from the University of Cape Town. He is also a Science Oscars finalist and, of course, incredibly passionate about cybercrime and focusing on research around cybersecurity. Hello, Dr. Daniel. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm good, and you?
We are doing very well on this side. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Now, you have many years in the industry, right? I'm sure there are many different kinds of cases that you've seen and experienced. Can you tell us about some of the things that you've experienced in the industry, some examples of cybercrime?
I think because, well, for context, I work in the Department of Electrical Engineering, so the bulk of my work is tailored towards engineering applications. And when you're looking at that, it's quite scary when you look at what can happen if an attacker is able to get into the system from that perspective. For example, if a person is able to break into a water plant, they'd be able to, there's been a case in Australia, in Maruchi, where the attacker was able to release untreated sewage into local waterways because that person applied for a job there and they were denied. So they hacked into the system, and that left the community without water for a very long time, and it cost the municipality millions to try to rectify that, not even thinking about the environmental damage that had happened there. So you can kind of look in from that perspective as well. From an electricity perspective, the more things become digitized, you can think of if a person is able to look at the ESCOM grid, for example, if a person gets in at a consumer level, if a person can see the usage patterns of specific individuals, they'd be able to tell when you are home, and even when you're home, what are you doing there? Are you sleeping and whatnot? So if a criminal gets that kind of information, you can imagine what they can do with it.
That is insane and also incredibly scary. Now, a lot of us rely on our banking apps. We use them every single day of our lives. And the reasons why we rely on them so much and we trust them so much is because they've got built-in security measures, right? So we trust them. But the question I'd like to ask you is, how do we then counteract real-time threats when it comes to cybercrime?
I think the main thing we have to do is kind of trust the systems. We have no choice. You can't not use the banking app, so you kind of have to have a certain level of trust for the engineers there, and they have very strict laws that guide what they can do in that perspective. What we can do is look at our own behavior as people, and we have a trust problem. We overly trust people, and that's how we end up being victims. Because, for example, if you get an unsolicited email or text message with a person promising you untold riches, and you have to share your personal information, your banking details and whatnot, and you share that information, that's what puts you at risk. If you have to log into your banking website or to an e-commerce website and you're using a weak password, an attacker is going to be able to exploit that and break into the system, because it doesn't matter what protection mechanisms are in place over there, they'll be able to bypass that. Another thing that people do, for example, is they download either apps from a dodgy website for their laptops or for their phones. An example over here is, for example, the WhatsApp GB. There have been studies showing that some of that has malicious software in it. We install that into our personal phones, and then the attacker is able to steal some of our information and use that against us. So we can't do anything per se with the security mechanisms of the bank, which we can trust are relatively secure. The biggest risk is us as users of these systems. We can only control that and have a healthy dose of skepticism when we're online and not trusting people as much.
Exactly. And I mean, it's making me think of all the stories that I've heard from various young people, all the stories that I've heard from friends as well, where in today's South Africa, if you lose your phone, you might as well say goodbye to everything on your phone, right? Because as technology advances, hackers are getting more and more smart and more clever as well. The thing is, Dr. Daniel, that the internet is everything to young South Africans right now. We use it for everything. We cannot run away from it. So how do we protect ourselves online?
Okay, well, firstly, in terms of the losing of the phone, I'll go and add, and certain phones, for example, if you have an iPhone, that phone, well, your information is definitely gone, but they use very sophisticated encryption over there, to the point where even the US government has been trying to force Apple to install a backdoor so that they can solve certain crimes, because they can't catch criminals because it is protected. Which is to show you that in as much as the hackers are getting more sophisticated, these protection mechanisms are also becoming very sophisticated. And there are companies, not all companies, there are companies that take this very seriously. What is important for us, again, we can't ignore the internet, as you're saying. What is important for us is to always try to mitigate our risk, right? Choosing the right products from the right company. And if, for example, you're going to be shopping online, what I'd do is, if I'm using an e-commerce website I don't know, I'll do a Google search. I'll go online and I'll try to figure out, what have people been saying about this? Usually if it's a scam, people online are going to be saying that is a scam. So you can go to websites like Hello Peter, because Hello Peter, people normally go there if they have something wrong they want to say about a specific company. Go on there, try to figure out what's going on. Go to social media, see what people are saying about all of this. And maybe even talk to people you know, to establish what we call is implicit trust. That you can kind of trust this because other people kind of trust this as well, right? And then from there, you kind of look, if I share my details, if I'm using my credit card online, for example, what is the worst case scenario that can happen? So if a person has my details, what can they do with this information? If they get my card, do I have a limit in terms of how much I can spend in a day? How fast can I cancel this card? All those kinds of things to mitigate our risk. But you are right, we cannot ignore the fact that we are living in a digital world and you do need to be online. We just need to be careful about who we trust and mitigate our risk.
Now, cybercrime doesn't only affect individuals, right? It also affects entrepreneurs, businesses as well. What advice do you have for them to protect their customers, to protect their businesses?
I think it's going to be the same thing. A lot of businesses, they tend to get into a trap of trusting everybody within the company. And not everybody within your small company requires access to all of the information that may or not be sensitive over there. So you need to establish, if a person, in cybersecurity protections, one thing we say is, if a person does not need access to particular information, they should not have that access. That's very important. The other thing that is very important that people don't consider is, there are laws that are governing how you're supposed to deal with user data. There's the POPIA that has just been passed, and there's recently also the Cybersecurity Act that tells us what is legal and what isn't legal. So I'd say businesses, especially from young people, it is very important that you go online, you look at all of these different laws, you look at what your responsibilities are so that you don't find yourself on the wrong side of the law.
All right, Dr. Daniel, thank you so much for giving us your insight on the show today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Same to you.
Alrighty, well, there you have it. Dr. Daniel just reminding me of the responsibility that we have on social media, the responsibility that we have on the internet at large. So if you see something weird happening on the net, if you see a scam, if you see phishing, be sure to report it so that the whole community knows about it. Thank you once again for joining me on the show. I will see you again on the next episode. Bye.